Have you ever wondered why, at a single glance, your mind decides that someone possesses the very aura of success? It is as if some faces are preordained by nature to carry a crown of fortune, while others seem destined to remain in the shadows. To understand this, we must look past the mystical and into the cold, elegant machinery of evolutionary biology. We must ask ourselves what markers of biological vitality are so deeply embedded in our DNA that we mistake them for luck. From an evolutionary standpoint, the human face is not merely a vessel for expression. It is a sophisticated billboard of genetic fitness. Throughout our history, survival depended on our ability to rapidly assess the health and capabilities of our peers. We evolved to favor traits that signaled a robust immune system and high reproductive viability. When we see a face that we describe as lucky or fortunate, we are often subconsciously reacting to a high density of these biological signals. Consider the structure of the cheekbones and the definition of the jawline. In the lexicon of evolutionary biology, these are not merely aesthetic choices. High, prominent cheekbones and a well-defined mandible are often associated with balanced hormonal profiles and structural integrity. These features suggest a body capable of maintaining itself against environmental stressors. They provide a scaffold for the face that conveys strength and stability, qualities that our ancestors equated with the ability to provide, protect, and endure. Then there is the clarity of the skin. In the wild, skin is a primary indicator of internal health. Clear, luminous skin serves as a proxy for a functioning immune system and a lack of chronic parasitic infection. When we perceive a face as radiant, our primitive brain interprets this as a lack of hidden disease. It is a biological green light, suggesting that the individual possesses the internal resources to thrive. We see this same logic reflected in the clarity of the eyes. Bright, clear eyes are a window into systemic health, signaling a body that is not burdened by inflammation or systemic fatigue. These are the vitality signals that humans have evolved to favor over millennia. We are hardwired to trust a face that looks nourished, balanced, and resilient. When we combine these elements, the skeletal strength of the jaw, the clarity of the skin, and the brightness of the eyes, we create a composite image of vitality. This is the biological architecture of what we call a lucky face. It is a masterpiece of genetic signaling, a visual shorthand for a body that is winning the marathon of survival. We do not see luck, we see health. We do not see fortune, we see the high-resolution evidence of a body that is functioning at its peak. In the quiet theater of our subconscious, these biological traits are the actors that play the role of destiny. But if biology provides the blueprint for what we perceive as vitality, how did our ancestors transform these physical observations into the metaphysical concept of destiny? To understand how we began to map fortune onto the human face, we must travel back to the dawn of civilization, where the line between the physical body and the spiritual realm was non-existent. In the ancient world, a face was not just a collection of features. It was a map of the soul's journey. In the fertile lands of Mesopotamia and the sprawling river valleys of Egypt, the human visage was treated as a divine script. For these early civilizations, the face served as a canvas where the gods had inscribed a person's ultimate purpose. In Egyptian iconography, the proportions of the face were often linked to the cosmic order. A face that mirrored the harmony of the heavens was believed to be blessed by the gods, while any deviation from that harmony suggested a fractured spirit. They didn't just see a chin or a brow. They saw the physical manifestation of a person's place within the divine hierarchy. As these societies transitioned from purely spiritual interpretations to more pragmatic, physical observations, the study of the face became a tool for governance and social order. In many tribal structures, facial markers were used to categorize individuals before they even spoke a word. A specific curve of the lip or the distance between the eyes could determine one's role in the tribe. If a face conveyed a certain aura of authority or docility, it dictated where that person stood in the communal ladder. This was the birth of facial destiny as a social technology. It allowed for a rapid, unspoken sorting of the population, creating a visual shorthand for who was meant to lead and who was meant to follow. This era also saw the birth of the first true facial destiny myths. These were the proto-sciences of our modern era, where observers began to notice patterns between facial structure and life outcomes. They saw the merchant with the wide, confident brow and the farmer with the weathered, enduring brow, and they began to weave these observations into folklore. They theorized that certain faces were born with a gravitational pull toward prosperity, while others were born with a heavy shadow over their features. These myths were not merely superstitions. They were the earliest attempts by humanity to find patterns in the chaos of life. By categorizing facial destiny, ancient people were trying to make the unpredictable world feel predictable. They wanted to believe that if they could read the face, they could read the future. They were looking for a way to see the invisible threads of fate woven into the very bone and skin of their neighbors. They turned the human face into a mirror of the cosmos, where every line and shadow told a story of what was yet to come. But even as our ancestors wove these myths into the fabric of their societies, a deeper, more primal mechanism was at work within the very neurons of the human brain. We must ask ourselves, why does the human brain subconsciously trust certain features before a single word is even spoken? To answer this, we have to descend into the neurological pathways of trust, where the biological machinery of our ancestors still governs our modern perceptions. Deep within the architecture of the brain lies the amygdala, our ancient sentinel for survival. Its primary function is to scan the environment for threats, and it does so with lightning speed. When we encounter a face, the amygdala is processing thousands of data points in milliseconds. It looks for signs of aggression, instability, or predation. When a face lacks these alarming cues, the amygdala sends a signal of safety. This is the first step in the formation of trust. If the brain perceives a face as non-threatening, the gates of the conscious mind open, allowing us to move from a state of high-alert suspicion to one of receptive curiosity. This process is further refined by our preference for rounded features. In our earliest stages of development, human infants are biologically programmed to favor rounded, smooth contours. This is an evolutionary shortcut. Rounded shapes are associated with softness and lack of danger. As we grow, this preference persists as a subconscious preference for safe facial geometry. We find ourselves drawn to faces that mimic these infant-like curves, as they trigger a sense of familiarity and security that is hardwired into our limbic system. Beyond basic geometry, the brain scans for what we call warmth markers. These are subtle indicators of emotional availability, such as the slight lifting of the outer corners of the eyes or the relaxed tension in the muscles around the mouth. When these markers are present, the brain begins a complex chemical dance. The perception of a safe face can actually trigger a release of oxytocin, often referred to as the cuddle hormone or the bonding chemical. This neurochemical surge fosters an immediate sense of connection, creating a visceral feeling of reliability. Our brains are also masterfully tuned to detect microsignals. These are the tiny, involuntary movements of facial muscles that occur in fractions of a second. A microexpression of contempt or fear can be detected by our subconscious even if we cannot consciously identify it. Conversely, a face that remains fluid and consistent in its expressions provides a steady stream of trustworthy data. This allows the brain to take a cognitive shortcut. Instead of analyzing a person's character over years of interaction, the brain uses the face as a proxy for their personality. It creates an instant trust, a psychological heuristic that tells us that this person is an ally, a leader, or a friend. In the quiet theater of our minds, the face becomes the ultimate shortcut to social navigation, allowing us to navigate the complexities of human interaction with an ancient, invisible compass. And yet, Even as our brains process these primal signals of safety and health, a more complex psychological distortion takes hold, one that fundamentally alters how we judge a person's character based on a single, isolated trait. This is the phenomenon known as the halo effect, a cognitive bias where our overall perception of an individual is distorted by a singular positive characteristic. In the realm of facial recognition, this means that when we encounter a face we perceive as attractive or symmetrical, our minds do not simply stop at aesthetic appreciation. Instead, the halo of beauty spills over, coloring every other assumption we make about that person's internal world. The human brain is inherently lazy. It seeks cognitive shortcuts to navigate a complex social landscape. When we see a face that fits our subconscious standard of beauty, our minds automatically fill in the blanks with positive attributes. We begin to project intelligence onto a symmetrical brow, assuming a person of such balanced features must possess a balanced and capable mind. We associate a harmonious face with a harmonious personality, creating a mental bridge where physical grace is mistaken for moral virtue. This is the virtue bias in action, where a pleasant exterior leads us to believe the individual is inherently more honest, more capable, and more trustworthy than they may actually be. This psychological spillover is most potent during the fleeting moments of a first impression. In those first seconds of contact, the halo effect creates a powerful atmospheric bias. If a person is perceived as physically lucky or attractive, they are often granted a subconscious elevation, a mental pedestal that shields them from skepticism. We are more likely to forgive their mistakes, listen to their ideas with more focus, and grant them a higher level of social authority without any tangible evidence of their competence. The brain essentially treats a beautiful face as a proxy for a beautiful soul, creating a feedback loop where the appearance fuels the perception of success, which in turn reinforces the belief that they are destined for success. This phenomenon has profound implications for social mobility and the distribution of opportunity. When the halo effect governs our professional and social interactions, it creates a systemic, pretty privilege. Individuals with faces that trigger these positive biases may find doors opening more easily, receiving more frequent smiles, and being offered more opportunities simply because their appearance signals a perceived luck that others lack. It is a silent, invisible architecture of advantage, where the mere geometry of a face can dictate the trajectory of a life. We are not just seeing a face, we are seeing a curated illusion of character, a psychological shadow cast by a single trait that convinces us that some people are simply born with the favor of the world. But what if the very architecture of your face is a mathematical blueprint that your subconscious interprets as a cosmic decree? Beyond the psychological spillover of the halo effect lies a deeper, more structural mystery: the profound relationship between symmetry and the human perception of fate. When we gaze upon a face that appears perfectly balanced, we are not merely observing an aesthetic preference. We are witnessing a visual representation of order. In the chaotic tapestry of the natural world, symmetry serves as a profound biological signal of stability. It suggests that the developmental journey of that individual was shielded from the ravages of environmental stress, providing a clear message of genetic integrity. From a developmental standpoint, bilateral symmetry is the hallmark of a successful biological process. During the intricate dance of embryogenesis, a body must mirror itself with remarkable precision. When this process is interrupted by pathogens, nutritional deficiencies, or genetic mutations, the resulting asymmetry serves as a biological warning light. To our ancestors, an asymmetrical face was a visual indicator of a struggle, a sign that the individual had survived a malady or carried a mutation. Conversely, a face that maintains perfect balance signals a body that has successfully navigated the obstacles of growth. We have evolved to interpret this lack of noise as a sign of inherent strength. We see symmetry, and we see a survivor. We see a body that has mastered its own internal blueprint. This perception is reinforced by the profound visual harmony of the golden ratio, a mathematical proportion that appears repeatedly throughout the natural world, from the spiral of galaxies to the arrangement of leaves. When we see these proportions reflected in a human face, our brains experience a sense of rightness. It is a profound aesthetic resonance. We perceive these balanced proportions as ordered by destiny because they mirror the mathematical constants of the universe itself. To the human mind, a face that follows these proportions feels less like a random collection of features and more like a deliberate piece of design. It suggests that the individual is in harmony with the underlying laws of nature. This is where the transition from biology to fate occurs. Because symmetry suggests a lack of internal chaos, we subconsciously project that stability onto the person's life path. We view a balanced face as a vessel of ordered fortune because it implies an internal consistency. If the body is balanced, we assume the spirit must be as well. We mistake the mathematical perfection of the bone structure for a preordained smoothness in the journey of life. We look at a symmetrical face, and we see a person whose life is shielded from the jagged edges of misfortune. In our minds, the face becomes a prophecy of a life lived in equilibrium, a visual testimony that the universe has conspired to provide this individual with a path of least resistance. We do not just see a face that is balanced, we see a destiny that is settled. Yet, if symmetry provides the structural evidence of a balanced life, we must wonder why we specifically project the concept of material success and high status onto certain facial proportions. This is where the biological blueprint meets the cultural construction of power. We have moved beyond the primal recognition of health and into the complex, human-made theater of social hierarchy. We have collectively agreed upon a visual vocabulary for what a winner looks like, creating a psychological mapping of success that dictates who we believe is capable of commanding a room or accumulating wealth. This projection begins with the concept of the executive look, a specific aesthetic standard that prioritizes high-contrast features and structural dominance. In the modern era, we often associate success with a face that possesses sharp, defined angles, a prominent jawline that suggests decisiveness, and high cheekbones that imply resilience. These are not merely neutral traits. They are interpreted by the subconscious as markers of authority. When we see a face with these exaggerated, high-contrast proportions, we project a narrative of competence onto them. We assume that a face capable of holding its own against the world must belong to someone who has conquered it. The media and the pervasive influence of Hollywood have accelerated this mapping, refining our definitions of the lucky face into a standardized ideal. For decades, the cinematic portrayal of the elite has favored specific facial ratios that signal stability and reach. We have been conditioned to associate a certain breadth of the face with a breadth of influence. This creates a feedback loop where the public perceives individuals with these proportions as more likely to possess the grit required for leadership. It is a form of aesthetic gatekeeping, where the geometry of the face acts as a silent resume, suggesting a person is predisposed to handle the pressures of high-stakes environments. Furthermore, there is a profound psychological connection between perceived facial proportions and the projection of wealth. We often associate certain expensive features, such as a perfectly aligned nose or a balanced orbital structure, with the ability to access resources. This is the psychological mapping of success. We see a face that conforms to these proportions, and we subconsciously conclude that the individual has been granted the favor of the universe. We mistake the mathematical harmony of their bone structure for the smooth trajectory of their financial and social rise. This is the ultimate cultural construction. We have taken the raw data of human biology and refined it into a sophisticated mythology of the lucky face. We project success onto these specific proportions because they provide a visual shortcut for complexity. It is much easier for the human brain to trust a face that looks like a winner than to wait for a person to prove their worth through actions. By aligning our perception of destiny with these specific facial ratios, we create a world where the face is no longer just a part of the body, but a pre-written biography of fortune. Imagine standing in a crowded marketplace thousands of years ago, where your entire destiny, your right to lead, to own, or to serve, could be decided simply by the curve of your jawline or the depth of your brow. For much of human history, we did not look at a person's character through their actions, but through the map of their bones. This is the haunting legacy of physiognomy, the ancient practice of reading the soul through the exterior of the face. Long before the advent of modern genetics, early humans sought to categorize the chaos of human behavior into something orderly and observable. They looked at the faces of their neighbors and saw patterns. They began to believe that the face was a mirror of the interior spirit, a biological blueprint that revealed a person's inherent worth. This was the birth of physiognomy as a tool for social engineering. It transformed the human face into a ledger of morality and status, moving away from mere observation and toward a structured pseudoscience. In these early societies, individuals were ranked by their bone structure. A prominent, high forehead was often equated with intellectual capacity and noble thought, while a heavy, protruding jaw was seen as a sign of physical dominance or, conversely, stubbornness. These were not just aesthetic preferences, they were the invisible walls of social hierarchy. By assigning virtues to specific facial proportions, ruling classes could justify their positions of power. If a leader possessed a face that the prevailing physiognomic rules deemed superior, their authority became an undeniable fact of nature rather than a political choice. This logic took a darker, more systemic turn when it was used to dehumanize. Physiognomy provided a convenient, scientific veneer for the oppression of the marginalized. By claiming that certain facial features were markers of servitude or intellectual inferiority, those in power could justify slavery and systemic inequality as if they were observing a biological truth. They looked at the faces of the oppressed and claimed to see a lack of gravity, a lack of the steady, grounded facial architecture they associated with leadership and dignity. In this way, the face became a gatekeeper, a physical barrier that determined who was allowed to hold the reins of society and who was relegated to the shadows. As the Enlightenment dawned and the scientific era took hold, the mystical grip of physiognomy began to loosen. The rise of objective biology and psychology slowly dismantled the idea that a nose or a chin could predict a person's fate. Yet, even as the practice declined in formal science, the echoes of these ancient hierarchies remain. We still find ourselves subconsciously seeking gravity in the faces of our leaders, still looking for that perceived architecture of authority. We are still, in many ways, haunted by the ancient belief that the face is the first map we read to decide who is lucky and who is left behind. And yet, as the physical science of bone structure began to shift toward a more modern observation, a different kind of architecture was being constructed in the shadows of the medieval world, one where the face was not just a map of social status, but a literal portal to the heavens. In the heart of medieval mysticism, the human countenance was reimagined as a theological battlefield. Here, the concept of the divine face emerged, moving beyond the earthly hierarchies of physiognomy to explore the spiritual aesthetic of the holy. To the medieval mind, a face was not merely skin and muscle. It was a canvas upon which the presence of the Creator could be revealed or concealed. In the flickering light of monastic cells and the hushed silence of cathedrals, the iconography of the saintly face became a primary tool for spiritual instruction. Artists and mystics began to codify a specific visual language for holiness. They did not seek to capture the raw, chaotic realism of a human being, but rather to distill the essence of the divine. This led to a profound shift in how facial proportions were understood. A perfectly balanced brow, an elongated chin, or a serene, symmetrical alignment was seen as a reflection of cosmic order. If the universe was created by a perfect architect, then a face that mirrored that symmetry was believed to be inhabited by a more perfect spirit. This aesthetic was heavily influenced by the enduring legacy of Byzantine art. The Byzantine masters perfected the art of the transfigured face, where the features were smoothed into a state of eternal stillness. In these icons, the eyes were often enlarged, suggesting a gaze that looked inward or upward toward the infinite. The goal was to move the viewer away from the distractions of the physical world and toward the reality of the soul. It was a deliberate departure from physical beauty. A face could be traditionally attractive in a worldly sense, yet still appear unlucky or spiritually hollow if it lacked the requisite grace of the holy. At the center of this mysticism was the concept of the inner light reflected upon the skin. Medieval mystics believed that the presence of the Holy Spirit would physically manifest as a radiance, a subtle luminosity that would soften the harsh lines of the human face. This was not a trick of the light, but a spiritual phenomenon where the skin became a translucent veil. When a holy man or woman was depicted, their face was meant to appear as if it were illuminated from within, suggesting that their very identity was being replaced by a divine spark. These visual cues of divine favor served a specific purpose. They allowed the faithful to identify the lucky ones, those who had been chosen by God. By looking at a saintly face, the observer was meant to see a victory over the flesh. The face became a signifier of spiritual fortune, a proof that the individual had transcended the mundane struggles of mortality. In this mystical framework, the lucky face was the one that had successfully surrendered its human imperfections to reflect the serene, unshakable geometry of the heavens. But if the medieval mind sought the divine in the symmetry of the heavens, what did the terrestrial world demand of the faces that commanded the earth? Beyond the spiritual icons of the cathedral, there existed a raw, biological reality where the very density of the skull was interpreted as a ledger of dominance. When we look at the faces of historical conquerors and modern titans, we are often struck by a recurring architecture of the bone. We find ourselves subconsciously searching for a certain gravity in the facial structure, a physical weight that suggests a person is capable of holding the reins of power. This is where the intersection of skeletal mass and perceived authority becomes a fascinating mystery of human evolution. Consider, first, the wide and prominent jawline. In the primal theater of human interaction, the mandible is more than a structural support for the teeth. It is a biological billboard for hormonal history. A broad, squared jaw is often subconsciously linked to high levels of testosterone during the developmental years. To our ancestral brains, this structural width signals a body that has successfully navigated the rigors of growth and competition. It projects a sense of permanence and stubbornness, a refusal to be moved. When we see a wide jaw, we perceive a foundational strength, as if the person's very skeleton is fortified against the pressures of the outside world. Moving upward, we encounter the brow ridge and the forehead. A pronounced, heavy brow ridge can be perceived as a marker of aggression, a structural shield that protects the eyes while casting a shadow of intensity over the gaze. It suggests a face built for confrontation, a predator's geometry that triggers a primitive caution in the observer. Conversely, a high, expansive forehead has been codified for centuries as the seat of the intellectual. It suggests a cavernous space for thought, a vast internal landscape where complex strategies are forged. By balancing these two features, the aggression of the brow and the intellect of the forehead, certain faces create a potent archetype of the visionary leader. This is the alchemy of skeletal mass. A face with significant bone density is perceived as grounded. In the psychology of authority, a A face that appears fleshy or soft may be seen as transient, but a face with sharp, defined angles and heavy bone structure feels like an architectural constant. These features were not merely observed by our ancestors, they were codified into the very definition of what a leader looks like. We have spent millennia sculpting our social hierarchies around these proportions, creating a feedback loop where those with the correct bone structure are granted the opportunities to achieve the success that then reinforces our belief in their inherent luck. We see the structure, we assume the strength, and in doing so, we grant them the power to lead. But if the Western world sought authority in the density of the bone, the Eastern traditions turned their gaze toward a far more fluid and elemental map of the human countenance. In the vast expanse of Chinese history, the practice of Mayan Xiang emerged not merely as a way to judge character, but as a sophisticated cosmological system that mapped an individual's destiny onto the very topography of their skin and muscle. To the practitioners of Mayan Xiang, the face is not a static mask. It is a living landscape where the cosmic forces of the universe manifest in physical form. At the heart of this ancient system lies the profound philosophy of the five elements, or Wu Xing. Every feature on the human face is believed to be governed by one of these elemental forces: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. A face dominated by the element of wood might manifest in upright, branching structures like the eyebrows or a long, straight nose, suggesting growth and vitality. Fire is seen in the radiance of the skin and the intensity of the eyes, representing passion and outward expression. Earth is found in the fullness of the cheeks and the stability of the jaw, grounding a person's destiny in endurance. Metal is reflected in the sharpness of the facial angles and the clarity of the bone structure, signifying discipline and refinement. Finally, water is observed in the fluidity of the expressions and the depth of the features, representing wisdom and the flow of emotion. When these elements are in harmony, a face is said to possess luck because it mirrors the balance of the universe itself. To navigate this map, the practitioner looks first to the three eyes, which comprise the physical eyes, the eyebrows, and the forehead. This trinity is the primary gateway of destiny. The eyebrows are the hairs of the soul, indicating one's social connections and the strength of their inner resolve. The forehead acts as the warehouse of one's fate, where the width and clarity of the bone suggest the breadth of one's opportunities. The eyes themselves are the windows of the spirit, where the qi, or life force, is most visible. In Mayan Xiang, fortune is not just about what you have, but how the qi flows through the facial muscles. If the qi is stagnant, the face appears weary and unlucky, regardless of its beauty. If the qi flows freely, the features seem vibrant and animated, suggesting a life of unobstructed movement. Furthermore, the face is divided into distinct zones that map the chronological stages of a human life. The upper face represents youth and early potential, the middle face denotes the peak of one's career and midlife stability, and the lower face, including the chin and jaw, reveals the harvest of one's later years. Within these zones, specific markings serve as navigational markers. A wealth line, or a distinct fold of skin, might indicate a person's ability to accumulate and retain resources, while certain markings near the ears or temples can signal longevity and the preservation of health. In this intricate system, the face becomes a living scroll, a continuous narrative where every wrinkle and curve tells the story of where a person has been and where the tides of destiny are destined to take them next. And yet, if the face is a living scroll of destiny, how did our ancestors attempt to rewrite the ink of their own fortune? Beyond the passive observation of bone and element, there existed a darker, more deliberate alchemy, a series of hidden rituals designed to physically sculpt and manipulate the face into a vessel of luck. While we perceive modern cosmetics as a matter of vanity, for much of human history, the modification of the countenance was a spiritual technology, a way to forge a protective shield against the whims of a chaotic universe. In many ancient cultures, the application of makeup was never merely about aesthetic appeal. It was a form of spiritual armor. To the ancients, certain colors were not just pigments, but conduits of power. Herbal dyes, derived from minerals and crushed plants, were used to coat the face in hues that signaled vitality and divine favor. A vibrant, healthy glow was synonymous with the presence of life force, and by using these dyes to enhance the radiance of the skin, individuals could mask the pallor of sickness or the shadows of misfortune. They were painting over the unlucky signs of decay, attempting to trick the universe and the observer into seeing a face of thriving prosperity. This manipulation extended into the very architecture of the skin through the use of jewelry and adornments to artificially redefine facial lines. In various nomadic and royal traditions, heavy metals and precious stones were placed strategically to frame the eyes or accentuate the jawline. These were not merely decorations, they were tools of facial engineering. By using gold or silver to create a sharper, more defined silhouette, a person could project a sense of gravity and permanence that their natural anatomy might lack. These ornaments acted as external skeletons, lending the wearer the perceived authority of the elite and creating a visual shortcut to success. More visceral and permanent were the rituals of scarring and tattooing. In many tribal societies, the face was a canvas for status, but it was also a map of spiritual protection. Ritualistic scars were carved into the flesh to signify a transition into a higher state of being, effectively sculpting a face that the community would recognize as shielded from evil. These marks were often placed in specific geometric patterns believed to deflect bad omens or to anchor the soul to the body. To the outsider, these might look like scars of trauma, but to the initiate, they were the deliberate construction of a lucky face, one that had survived the trial of transformation and was therefore destined for favor. Ultimately, these practices were about the symbolic masking of the mundane. By altering the face through dye, jewelry, and scarification, the individual sought to erase the unlucky markers of the common man and replace them with the iconography of the fortunate. They understood a profound psychological truth, that the world treats the face we present as the destiny we are meant to inhabit. By sculpting the appearance, they were attempting to sculpt the very trajectory of their lives. But if the face is a canvas for spiritual protection and personal alchemy, how did those who sat upon thrones use these same aesthetics as a systematic gatekeeper to exclude the masses? While the common man might use pigments to mask misfortune, the elite developed a more sophisticated strategy, utilizing facial standards to create an invisible, impenetrable barrier to power. They didn't just want to look lucky, they wanted to codify what a ruler looked like, ensuring that the face of authority remained a closed club, accessible only to those who possessed the right biological and aesthetic credentials. In the halls of the aristocracy, the polished look was not merely a preference for cleanliness. It was a visual declaration of leisure. A face devoid of the grime of labor, smoothed by high-quality oils and refined by a lifestyle of ease, served as a silent resume. It signaled that the individual did not have to work with their hands, creating a visual distinction between the governed and the governors. By cultivating a look of effortless grace, the elite established a standard of facial aesthetics that equated refinement with the right to command. Conversely, this system relied on the deliberate exclusion of rugged or peasant features. Faces that bore the heavy, weary lines of manual labor or the weathered textures of outdoor life were systematically coded as unfit for leadership. In the eyes of the elite, a face that looked like it had endured the elements was a face that had been conquered by them, rather than one that could conquer others. By marginalizing these unlucky facial markers, the ruling class ensured that the aesthetics of the working class remained synonymous with servitude. This created a system where the face became a credential, as valid as a seal of office or a title of nobility. To enter the inner circles of power, one had to conform to a specific aesthetic mold, a standard of facial symmetry, clarity, and gravity that suggested a pedigree of success. It was a form of aesthetic gatekeeping where the mere presence of a peasant face could be a reason for denial, regardless of an individual's actual competence. The face was the first hurdle in a race that many were never allowed to start. Over centuries, these grooming standards evolved into a sophisticated technology of class preservation. From the powdered faces of the 18th century French court to the curated, high-definition aesthetics of modern corporate leadership, the goal has remained constant: to maintain a visual distance between the elite and the masses. It is the creation of a facial privilege, a barrier to entry that functions on a subconscious level. When we see a face that fits the standard, we grant it the benefit of the doubt, we offer it trust, and we grant it a seat at the table. The lucky face of the elite is not just a byproduct of fortune. It is a carefully maintained architecture of exclusion, a way to ensure that power stays in the hands of those who look like they were born to hold it. Have you ever wondered why your pulse quickens or your mood lifts simply by looking at a person who seems to radiate an effortless sense of fortune? It is a phenomenon that sits at the intersection of ancient instinct and modern neurochemistry. When we gaze upon a face that we perceive as lucky, our brains are not merely performing a passive observation. Instead, they are engaging in a rapid, sophisticated appraisal of visual data that triggers a profound physiological reaction. To understand this, we must look into the reward system of the human brain. Deep within our neural architecture lies the mesolimbic pathway, often referred to as the brain's pleasure center. This system is designed to reward us for finding things that are beneficial to our survival. When we see a face that possesses a certain harmony, one that our subconscious interprets as successful, healthy, or fortunate, the brain treats this visual input as a high-value reward. It releases a pulse of dopamine, the neurotransmitter of desire and motivation, creating a subtle chemical high. This is the aesthetic high, a fleeting but powerful rush of pleasure that reinforces our preference for certain facial structures. Evolution has played a vital role in sculpting this response. For our ancestors, the ability to quickly identify a healthy, thriving individual was a matter of survival. A face that projected vitality and competence signaled a person of high status or genetic fitness. Over millennia, the human brain evolved to reward the recognition of these traits. We learned to associate pleasing facial proportions with safety and prosperity. Consequently, the mere sight of a lucky face provides a sense of security, and the brain rewards that feeling of safety with a dopaminergic spike. This process happens with astonishing speed. Before the conscious mind can even articulate why a person looks fortunate, the visual cortex has already sent its signals to the emotional centers of the brain. This is the rapid appraisal of facial pleasure. It is a precognitive reflex. We are essentially being chemically seduced by symmetry and proportion. When we see a face that aligns with our internal blueprints of success, the brain rewards us for the recognition, making us feel more inclined to trust that person, follow their lead, or simply enjoy their presence. This physiological reaction to facial harmony is one of the most subtle yet pervasive forces in human interaction. It creates an invisible magnetism. When someone possesses a lucky face, they are unknowingly broadcasting a chemical signal to everyone they encounter. They are triggering a microscopic dopamine release in the observers, creating an immediate, instinctive sense of favor. It is a silent dialogue of neurochemistry, where the face acts as a key, unlocking the reward centers of the mind. We do not just see luck, we feel it through the chemistry of our own neurons, drawn toward the faces that our biology tells us are destined for greatness. And yet, if dopamine is the spark that ignites our interest in a lucky face, it is the perception of kindness that provides the steady flame of sustained trust. Have you ever noticed how some faces seem to hold a soft, almost luminous quality that makes them appear inherently favored by the universe? This is not a coincidence of aesthetics. It is a profound psychological phenomenon where we conflate softness with fortune. When we look at a face with rounded features, there is an immediate, subconscious shift in our internal security. Sharp angles can trigger a primal alert, but curves suggest a lack of hostility. This is the babyface effect in its most sophisticated form. From our earliest moments of life, we are conditioned to associate rounded cheeks, soft jawlines, and wide eyes with the safety of infancy. Because we view these traits as markers of vulnerability and nurturance, we project a sense of luck onto them. We subconsciously assume that a person who looks approachable is a person who has been spared by fate, shielded from the harsh edges of a demanding world. This perception is further deepened by the human mind's tendency to associate kindness with abundance. In our collective narrative, the blessed individual is rarely portrayed as a jagged or severe figure. Instead, the iconography of fortune is draped in the velvet of benevolence. We see a person with a gentle expression, and our brains fill in the blanks of their life story with one of ease and generosity. We assume they have enough to share, enough to be kind, and enough to remain calm. A soft face becomes a visual shorthand for a life of plenty. It suggests that the individual has moved beyond the struggle for survival and into a state of grace. This is the psychological comfort of the non-threatening face. In a chaotic world, a kind countenance acts as an oasis of predictability. When we encounter a face that radiates warmth, our nervous systems relax. We stop looking for hidden motives and begin to see a person who is in harmony with their environment. This harmony is what we misinterpret as luck. We see a person who seems at peace with the world, and we conclude that the world must be at peace with them. Finally, we must consider the cultural myth of the benevolent figure. For centuries, religious and artistic traditions have depicted the most fortunate souls as those with serene, welcoming expressions. From the faces of saints to the smiles of prosperous merchants in classical paintings, we have been trained to believe that a blessed life leaves a mark of softness on the skin. We project our own moral ideals onto the geometry of the face, creating a cycle of perception where kindness is seen as the ultimate fruit of good fortune. We do not just see a person who is lucky. We see a person whose face serves as a mirror for the life we wish we could lead, a sanctuary of soft lines and quiet grace. But what if the secret to this perceived luck lies not in the static geometry of the bone, but in the microscopic dance of the muscles? While the brain responds to the soft curves of a kind face, it is simultaneously performing a high-speed surveillance of the tiny, involuntary movements known as microexpressions. These are the flickers of truth that occur in the fractions of a second between conscious thoughts, revealing a hidden architecture of confidence that we often mistake for destiny. To understand the face of a winner, we must first observe the speed of reaction. In high-stakes environments, the human nervous system is under constant stress. However, a person who possesses a sense of internal mastery displays a peculiar temporal grace. Their facial muscles do not react with the jagged, erratic speed of the anxious. Instead, there is a fluid, controlled transition between expressions. When a challenge arises, the lucky face does not twitch or recoil. It processes the stimulus and responds with a deliberate, measured shift. This lack of frantic movement signals to the observer that the individual is not being overwhelmed by their circumstances, but is instead moving through them with ease. One of the most profound markers of this hidden confidence is the suppression of fear. In a moment of tension, most people experience a leak of anxiety, a fleeting widening of the eyes, or a tightening of the upper lip. A face associated with fortune, however, masters the art of the mask. Through a subconscious physiological discipline, these individuals can stifle the primal flinch. By suppressing the involuntary signals of fear, they project a facade of invulnerability. To the observer, this looks like a person who is shielded by luck, when in reality, it is a sophisticated mastery of emotional regulation. Consider also the nuance of the controlled smirk. It is not a broad, performative grin, but a subtle, asymmetrical lifting of the corner of the mouth. This is the expression of someone who knows something the rest of the room does not. It signals a high-status internal state where the individual feels they have the upper hand. When paired with the specific role of the ocular muscles, this effect is amplified. High-status individuals often maintain a soft gaze, a relaxation of the orbicularis oculi muscles around the eyes. This lack of tension in the brow projects an aura of poise, suggesting that the individual is comfortable in their own skin and, by extension, comfortable in their position of power. Ultimately, the face of fortune is defined by a paradoxical stillness. While the world around them is in flux, the high achiever masks uncertainty through a profound facial composure. They do not fidget with their features, they do not let their face betray their doubts. By maintaining this stillness, they project an image of someone who is perpetually favored. We see their composure and interpret it as an external blessing, when it is actually a masterpiece of internal calibration, a face that has learned to hold its ground against the tremors of the unknown. And yet, while the stillness of a confident face commands respect, it is the windows of the soul that ultimately dictate whether we allow that confidence to be trusted. Have you ever wondered why your very first instinct is to look into a stranger's eyes to determine if they are a friend or a foe? This is the most ancient and profound appraisal of human character, where the geometry of the eye serves as a silent barometer for the truth of a person's intent. The human brain is hardwired to prioritize the eyes because they provide a high-density stream of information that is difficult to fully feign. When we assess trustworthiness, we are looking for the honest eye, a state where the ocular muscles appear relaxed yet attentive. In the landscape of facial perception, the shape of the eye plays a massive role in this subconscious vetting. Rounder eyes are often associated with openness and vulnerability, suggesting a person who is willing to see and be seen. These shapes are frequently linked to the babyface effect, where the softness of the curve implies a lack of hidden agendas. Conversely, almond-shaped eyes are often perceived as sophisticated and focused. While they can signal intelligence, their narrower profile can sometimes be interpreted as more guarded, requiring the observer to look deeper for signs of sincerity. Beyond the static shape, the dynamic movement of the eyelids provides a crucial map of a person's internal state. The upper eyelid acts as a curtain of honesty. When it remains steady, it suggests a person who is composed and transparent. However, when the eyelids droop or tighten in specific ways, they can signal fatigue, suspicion, or even a hidden threat. The way a person manages their eyelids allows them to express a level of vulnerability that is essential for human bonding. A face that shows a slight, honest softening of the lids invites us in, while a face that keeps the lids perpetually tense acts as a fortress, signaling a person who may be withholding a secret. Perhaps the most involuntary and revealing signal of all is pupil dilation. Though we cannot consciously control it, the expansion of the pupil is a direct window into the autonomic nervous system. In the presence of something we desire or find fascinating, the pupils dilate. When we see someone whose eyes react to us in this way, our brains register a primal connection. It is a physiological admission of interest that bypasses the conscious mind, creating an immediate sense of rapport. These reactions are not merely social preferences, they are rooted in the deep history of our species. Evolution demanded that we prioritize eye-based trust because, for our ancestors, a misjudgment of a peer's intent could be fatal. We developed a hyperacute ability to read the eyes to distinguish between a protector and a predator. We are still carrying those ancient blueprints today. When we see a face whose eyes project honesty, we are not just seeing a lucky person. We are witnessing a biological masterpiece of communication that tells our lizard brain that this individual is safe, reliable, and worthy of our trust. But if the eyes are the windows of trust, what about the curve of the mouth? And how does a single expression of joy rewrite the very expectations we hold for another person? To understand this, we must examine the winner's smile, a specific facial configuration that does more than just signal happiness. It acts as a profound marker of success, a visual shorthand that our brains decode in milliseconds. At the heart of this perception is the decode smile, the gold standard of genuine human emotion. Unlike a polite, social grin that only engages the muscles around the lips, the decode smile involves the involuntary contraction of the orbicularis oculi, the muscles that create those characteristic crinkles at the corners of the eyes. This symmetry of movement signals a deep, authentic internal state. When we see this, our subconscious recognizes a lack of effort. It suggests a person who is so secure in their position that they do not need to perform. They simply are fortunate. There is, however, a delicate line between the smile that invites us in and the one that pushes us away. A lucky face often strikes a balance between the inviting and the authoritative. A smile that is too wide or overly exaggerated can be perceived as performative or even suspicious, triggering a sense of arrogance that creates a barrier. In contrast, the winner's smile is characterized by a controlled confidence. It is a grin that suggests high social status, signaling that the individual possesses the resources and the ease of mind to be jovial. This is the face of someone who has already won, and because humans are evolutionarily wired to associate success with vitality, we subconsciously project a sense of luck onto anyone who can project this level of poise. This facial signal performs a remarkable feat of social engineering by lowering the defenses of those around them. When we perceive a smile as genuine and confident, our amygdala, the brain's fear center, quiets down. The face becomes a green light, a signal that the environment is safe and the individual is an ally. By lowering our guards, the winner's smile allows for a smoother flow of information and cooperation. We are less likely to scrutinize the motives of a smiling face and more likely to offer opportunities, trust, and resources. In the complex theater of human hierarchy, the wide, confident smile is a broadcast of power. It tells the observer that the wearer of the face is not struggling against the world, but is instead moving with it. We see a person who is favored by fate, and our brains instinctively want to align with that favor. The winner's smile does not just show us that a person is happy. It rewires our expectations, leading us to believe that their success is inevitable, their fortune is permanent, and their destiny is bright. We are not just looking at a smile. We are looking at a visual trophy of a life well lived, and our subconscious is eager to follow that lead. But if the winner's smile serves as a visual trophy of success, what happens when we encounter its opposite? A face that seems to broadcast an aura of misfortune. It is one of the most unsettling yet pervasive human experiences, the reflexive instinct to distance ourselves from individuals whose facial expressions suggest a life of perpetual struggle. We often find ourselves turning away, not out of malice, but because of a subconscious recognition of what we perceive as an unlucky countenance. This phenomenon begins with the perception of the heavy face, a look characterized by deep, permanent furrows and a downward pull of the features. When a face appears perpetually scowled or weighted down by gravity, it communicates a narrative of chronic endurance. To the observer, these are not just wrinkles, they are the visible scars of a difficult existence. We see a face that has been weathered by hardship, and our brains interpret this as a lack of protection from the world. We avoid these faces because they project an atmosphere of miserable persistence, a visual signal that the individual is perpetually losing their battle against circumstance. Deeply embedded in this avoidance is our reaction to the markers of chronic stress. The human brain is exquisitely tuned to detect cortisol-induced tension. When we see a face where the brow is constantly knit, or the jaw is perpetually clenched, we are seeing the physiological residue of a high-stress life. This tension creates an immediate emotional distance. It signals a person who is perpetually in survival mode, and humans are evolutionarily programmed to be wary of those who appear to be in a state of constant agitation. We subconsciously fear that the stress radiating from their face is a contagious emotion, a psychic weight that we do not wish to shoulder. There is also a profound stigma attached to the unlucky expression. We tend to associate a face that looks weary or defeated with a lack of agency. If a person looks as though they are burdened by fate, we instinctively assume that their luck has run dry. This perception creates a social barrier where the individual is relegated to the periphery of our social circles. We subconsciously fear that being near such a person might diminish our own sense of prosperity. It is as if the face acts as a barometer for the environment, and we avoid the low pressure of a miserable expression to preserve our own internal equilibrium. Ultimately, this avoidance is a manifestation of our fear of bad luck as a communal experience. We see the face of the unlucky as a warning sign, a visual representation of the hardships we hope to avoid. By turning away, we are attempting to shield ourselves from a narrative of misfortune that our lizard brains perceive as a threat to our own well-being. We are not just avoiding a face. We are avoiding the story that face tells about the world, choosing instead to stay within the orbit of the fortunate, where the lines of the face promise a life of ease. Have you ever wondered why we possess such an uncanny ability to see destiny written in the curves of a stranger's cheek or the arch of a brow? It is a phenomenon that feels like ancient magic, yet it is rooted deeply in the architecture of the human mind. To understand how a face becomes a symbol of luck, we must first look at the invisible machinery of confirmation bias. This is the psychological filter that allows our brains to cherry-pick reality, constructing a narrative that favors our existing beliefs while casting the contradictory truth into the shadows of forgetfulness. Consider the sheer volume of human experience. Every day, thousands of individuals with symmetrical, fortunate faces fail, struggle, and face hardship. Yet, because these stories do not fit the myth of the lucky face, they are discarded by our collective memory. They are the silent data points that we simply choose not to see. Conversely, the moment a person with a lucky appearance achieves a massive success, our brains light up. We seize upon that single instance as definitive proof, weaving it into a legend. We highlight the winner and ignore the thousands of losers who shared the exact same facial geometry. This is the birth of a myth. Storytelling is the catalyst that transforms these isolated observations into cultural folklore. When we hear a tale of a person who looked like a winner and became one, the story reinforces the idea of facial destiny. We aren't just observing a coincidence, we are participating in a narrative. Every time a story is told, it reinforces the cognitive pathway. We begin to see the face not as a biological accident, but as a prophetic map. This is the cycle of anecdotal evidence. We hear one story, and it validates our suspicion. We hear a second, and the legend hardens into a rule. The human memory is also designed to favor the fortunate outlier. We are biologically wired to remember the extraordinary. A person who wins the lottery or rises to power with a lucky face becomes a permanent fixture in our mental gallery. They become the prototype. Meanwhile, the unlucky faces that succeed, those who break the mold, become invisible because they challenge our internal logic. Our brains prefer a simple, cohesive story over a complex, messy reality. It is far easier to believe that a face dictates a fate than to accept that success is a chaotic blend of timing, effort, and sheer randomness. In this way, confirmation bias acts as a sculptor, carving out a lucky legend from the marble of human experience. We see what we want to see, and we remember what we want to believe. The mystery of the lucky face may not be written in our DNA, but rather in the way our minds curate the world around us, turning the flickering lights of coincidence into the steady glow of destiny. But if our minds are so adept at weaving these legends, what does the cold, hard reality of data actually tell us about the face of fortune? When we step away from the warmth of human narrative and into the sterile environment of statistical analysis, the mystery of the lucky face begins to dissolve into a different kind of truth. If we look for a direct, mathematical correlation between bone structure and financial wealth or professional achievement, we find a startling void. There is no empirical data that suggests a specific jawline, a certain nose bridge, or a particular eye shape acts as a predictor for success in any measurable, repeatable way. The data remains stubbornly silent because, in the eyes of science, the face is a biological byproduct, not a blueprint for destiny. This brings us to the profound concept of survivorship bias, a statistical trap that colors our view of the world. We look at the faces of the world's most successful leaders and celebrities, and we see a pattern of aesthetic beauty or luck. However, we are only looking at the survivors. We see the winners who made it to the podium, but we do not see the millions of individuals who possess the exact same facial features but never reached the same heights. The statistical likelihood of a face predicting success is effectively zero because we are looking at a tiny, non-representative sample of humanity. We see the lucky faces of the few and assume they represent the rule, when in reality, they are merely the outliers of a vast and chaotic distribution. To understand this, we must consider the sheer variance in human facial traits. Genetic diversity is so vast that any specific combination of features occurs thousands of times across the globe. If a certain facial structure were truly a predictor of success, we would see a massive, undeniable concentration of wealth in people with those specific traits. Yet, we do not. We see success distributed across every possible facial geometry, proving that the face is an independent variable. While some studies on pretty privilege suggest that attractive people may receive slight advantages in initial social interactions or job interviews, these are psychological reactions to perceived health and symmetry, not a reflection of internal capability or destined luck. These statistics show that while a face might open a door through the halo effect, it does not provide the keys to the room. The data confirms a sharp separation between genetics and opportunity. A face may be a vessel, but it is not the engine. Success is driven by a complex web of systemic access, personal grit, and random timing, all of which operate independently of the symmetry of a cheekbone. In the end, the statistics suggest that while the world may project a destiny onto the face itself remains a silent passenger on the journey of life. But if the data suggests the face is merely a passenger, why does the world treat it as the driver of economic destiny? We must confront a sobering reality where the subjective perception of a face translates into the objective movement of capital. This is where the abstract mystery of the lucky face meets the cold machinery of the economy, manifesting in what sociologists call the beauty premium. In the high-stakes arena of salary negotiations, research has shown that individuals perceived as more aesthetically pleasing often command higher starting wages and faster promotions. It is a silent tax on the less fortunate and a hidden subsidy for the lucky, where the brain's reflexive trust in symmetry is monetized before a single word of competence is even spoken. This economic advantage begins in the very first moments of a professional encounter. When a hiring manager scans a sea of resumes, the subconscious mind performs a rapid aesthetic audit. Faces that lean toward symmetry and fortunate proportions are often subconsciously flagged as more capable, healthier, and more reliable. This bias creates a systemic hurdle where certain faces are granted a wider margin of error. A person with a lucky face may be given the benefit of the doubt during a period of poor performance, while a face perceived as unlucky or harsh may be judged more stringently for the same mistakes. The face becomes a social lubricant, easing the path of commerce for some while creating friction for others. The implications extend deep into the world of finance and credit. When a person sits across a desk to apply for a loan, the face value of their trustworthiness is being weighed by the lender. Studies into facial trust suggest that certain features are associated with honesty and stability. If a face triggers a sense of reliability, it can subtly influence the perception of risk. A lucky face might facilitate a smoother approval process, granting access to the capital necessary to build empires, while a face that lacks these subconscious triggers may face higher scrutiny or more frequent denials. It is a form of invisible gatekeeping, where the architecture of the bone structure dictates the flow of liquidity. In the realm of sales and leadership, the concept of facial authority takes center stage. A face that projects confidence and fortune can command a room instantly. It allows a speaker to project a sense of inevitability, making their proposals seem like safer bets. This is the systemic economic advantage of the lucky face. It is not that the face possesses the wealth, but that the face serves as a credential that the human brain accepts without question. We are living in a world where the face of fortune acts as an unspoken passport, granting its owner easier entry into rooms of power, higher ceilings for their earnings, and a faster velocity of opportunity. The face remains a passenger, yet in our current economic landscape, it is a passenger that holds the keys to the vehicle. And yet, if the face is a passenger holding the keys to the vehicle, we must ask why the most prominent passengers in our history appear to share a strikingly similar map of features. When we observe the pantheon of high achievers, from the titans of industry to the luminaries of the arts, a peculiar aesthetic consistency begins to emerge. It is as if the climb to the summit of success filters for a specific visual frequency, creating a collective portrait of the victor. This phenomenon begins with the prevalence of high symmetry in leadership. Evolution has wired the human brain to equate symmetry with biological fitness and genetic health. In the high-stakes theater of human hierarchy, a face that appears balanced and harmonious acts as a silent signal of competence. When we see a leader with a symmetrical bone structure, our subconscious interprets it as a sign of internal order and stability. We subconsciously project the idea of a structured life onto a structured face, creating a feedback loop where the appearance of balance becomes synonymous with the possession of power. Beyond the raw architecture of bone, there is the role of the groomed aesthetic. High-performers often inhabit a sphere where the presentation of the self is a curated commodity. The lucky look is frequently reinforced by a polished, intentional maintenance of the features. This is not merely about vanity. It is about the signaling of resources. A groomed face suggests a person who has the time, the capital, and the discipline to maintain their public image. It suggests a life that is under control, rather than a life that is at the mercy of circumstance. This aesthetic polish serves as a visual shorthand for success, making the individual appear as though they have already mastered their environment. Furthermore, we cannot ignore the profound correlation between confidence and facial poise. High achievers often possess a specific muscular relaxation in the face, a lack of tension in the brow, or a steady, calm set of the jaw. This poise is the physical manifestation of a mind that is not easily rattled. It is the face of someone who expects to win, and because they expect to win, their facial muscles reflect that certainty. This poise feeds into the self-fulfilling prophecy of the winner look. When a person carries themselves with the poise of a victor, they are treated as a victor by those around them. They are granted more opportunities, more trust, and more deference, which in turn provides the very resources needed to achieve that success. Finally, there is the invisible impact of high-status lifestyles on facial health. Success often provides access to elite nutrition, stress management, and advanced skincare, which preserve the vitality of the skin and the clarity of the eyes. The lucky face is often a face that has been shielded from the wear and tear of low-status survival. It is the face of someone who has the luxury of being well-rested and well-nourished. In this way, the face becomes a mirror of the rewards of success, where the fortune of the individual is physically etched into the vibrancy of their appearance, completing the cycle of the lucky face as both a gateway to power and a trophy of its attainment. But if the face is a passenger holding the keys to the vehicle, we must ask why the most prominent passengers in our history appear to share a strikingly similar map of features. While we have discussed the internal psychology of the gaze, we must now turn our attention to the external theater of the workplace, where the abstract concept of pretty privilege transforms into a tangible, structural inequality. In the sterile corridors of corporate life, the face becomes more than a biological accident. It becomes a silent resume that is read before a single word is spoken. This phenomenon is rooted in the halo effect, a cognitive bias where our brains take one positive trait, such as facial symmetry or aesthetic appeal, and subconsciously apply it to a person's entire character. In a professional setting, this means that a person with a lucky face is often granted an invisible subsidy of trust. When they speak, their words are perceived as more authoritative. When they lead, their decisions are viewed as more competent. This is not a reflection of their actual ability, but a shortcut taken by the human mind, which prefers to associate a harmonious face with a harmonious mind. This bias manifests in the very architecture of the corporate hierarchy. Research suggests that attractive faces often move through faster promotion tracks, not because they perform better, but because they are more likable in the eyes of those who hold the power. In team dynamics, likability is frequently a proxy for aesthetic preference. A person whose face triggers a positive subconscious response is more likely to be invited into inner circles, given high-visibility projects, and mentored by senior leadership. They are the ones who are remembered in the hallways of power, while those whose faces do not trigger these reflexive positive cues may find themselves sidelined, their competence overshadowed by a lack of visual luck. For those without what the world deems a lucky face, the professional landscape can become a series of hidden barriers. They may find themselves working twice as hard to overcome a baseline of skepticism. They are often forced to overperform to prove their competence, whereas their lucky counterparts are often allowed a wider margin of error. In the moment of a high-stakes negotiation or a promotion meeting, a face that lacks the subconscious triggers of trustworthiness or health can be unfairly penalized, creating a glass ceiling built not of policy, but of perception. The tragedy of this systemic inequality is its invisibility. It is a tax on the less fortunate and a subsidy for the lucky, occurring in the microseconds of a handshake or the fleeting glance of a hiring manager. When the world treats a face as a shortcut to competence, it creates a professional ecosystem where the face of fortune acts as an unspoken passport, granting its owner a smoother path, a louder voice, and a faster velocity of opportunity. In this environment, the mystery of luck is no longer a matter of destiny, but a matter of structural privilege. But if the face is a passenger holding the keys to the vehicle, we must ask a new question. Can the cold, unfeeling logic of artificial intelligence finally decode and replicate the mystery of the lucky face? In our modern era, we have moved beyond the subjective whispers of folklore and into the era of the algorithm. We are now attempting to quantify destiny itself, turning the ethereal concept of luck into a series of data points that a machine can calculate. At the forefront of this movement are sophisticated AI algorithms designed to score human attractiveness and social status. These systems do not see a person as a soul or a story. They see a geometric map. They analyze the distance between the pupils, the curvature of the jawline, and the precise proportions of the midface. By processing millions of images, these machines learn to identify what the human brain subconsciously labels as fortunate. They are essentially attempting to create a mathematical formula for the halo effect, isolating the specific visual frequencies that trigger our reflexive trust and admiration. However, as we attempt to digitize the architecture of fortune, we encounter a profound technological wall. AI is exceptional at pattern recognition, but it struggles with the nuance of luck. To a machine, a face is a static collection of pixels, but to the human psyche, a lucky face is a dynamic experience. Luck is not just about symmetry, it is about the way a face moves, the microexpressions of confidence, and the cultural context of a smile. An algorithm can tell you that a face is aesthetically pleasing, but it cannot yet understand why that beauty feels like an invitation to success. It can identify the what, but it remains blind to the why. Furthermore, we must confront the shadow of bias lurking within the code. AI is only as objective as the data it consumes. If the training sets for these algorithms are fed images of existing winners, the wealthy, the powerful, and the famous, the AI will simply mirror our existing prejudices. It will learn to define luck as a reflection of current social hierarchies, reinforcing the very gatekeeping we have already observed in the corporate world. Instead of discovering a new truth about destiny, the AI may simply automate and accelerate the pretty privilege we see in our streets and offices. We are moving toward a future of AI-driven aesthetic gatekeeping. Imagine a world where automated systems screen candidates, grant credit, or offer opportunities based on an attractiveness score that correlates with perceived luck. When the machine decides that a certain facial geometry is a proxy for reliability, the face of fortune is no longer a psychological myth. It becomes a hard-coded reality. We risk creating a digital aristocracy where the algorithm acts as the ultimate arbiter of who is meant to succeed, turning the biological accident of our faces into a permanent, automated blueprint for our lives. What if the face you see before you is not a map of destiny, but a carefully curated masterpiece of deception? For centuries, we have looked into the eyes of others and attempted to discern their fortune through the geometry of their bones and the curve of their lips. Yet, history reveals a deeper, more subversive truth. We have not only observed fate, we have attempted to paint it onto our own skin. The history of cosmetics is, in many ways, the history of the human attempt to rewrite the narrative of luck. In the courts of the Renaissance and the empires of the East, the application of cosmetics was never merely about vanity. It was about the engineering of status. Consider the use of white lead, a toxic yet coveted pigment. By coating the skin in a ghostly, porcelain pallor, the elite signaled a life removed from the harsh labor of the sun. It was a visual declaration of leisure. To have a pale face was to possess the luxury of shade, effectively signaling to the world that one was destined for a life of command rather than toil. This was the first step in the evolution of cosmetics as a tool for fate shaping, where the chemical alteration of the skin served as a proxy for the elevation of the soul. Then, there was the role of rouge. In an era before modern medicine, a flush of color was the ultimate signifier of vitality. By applying crimson to the cheeks, individuals could project a sense of health and vigor that defied the exhaustion of daily life. It was a way to manufacture the winner's glow, suggesting a body and a destiny overflowing with life force. As we moved through the ages, the practice shifted from a ritual of status to a broader cultural transition toward fashion. The goal was no longer just to show that one belonged to the aristocracy, but to adopt the aesthetics of success itself. Makeup became a way to curate a lucky face, smoothing out the lines of worry, brightening the eyes of fatigue, and sculpting the features into a more palatable, trustworthy shape. In this sense, cosmetics function as a mask of luck. When we apply a layer of pigment, we are attempting to bridge the gap between who we are and who we wish the world to perceive us to be. We are creating a visual shorthand for fortune. By refining the face, we influence the way the world interacts with us, triggering the same subconscious biases we have explored before. We create a facade of competence and grace that invites opportunity, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where the mask of luck eventually begins to attract the very fortune it seeks to mimic. We do not just paint our faces, we paint the way the world sees our future. And yet, if cosmetics were the paint used to shade the canvas of the face, what happens when the canvas itself is deemed insufficient to hold the weight of destiny? Beyond the mere application of pigments, history reveals a more profound and physical intervention where the very architecture of the face was modified through prosthetics and structural additions. This was the transition from aesthetic enhancement to the deliberate engineering of fortune, where the elite sought to physically graft the hallmarks of luck onto their own anatomy. Consider the historical use of wigs and hair extensions, which were far more than fashion statements. In the courts of Europe and the empires of Asia, hair was a primary indicator of vitality and lineage. A full, lustrous mane was a biological signal of wealth and health. When nature failed to provide this, the wealthy turned to elaborate wigs and hairpieces made of human hair or high-quality fibers. These were not just accessories, they were prosthetics of vitality. By crowning themselves with artificial abundance, they were signaling a state of perpetual prosperity, a physical manifestation of a life that had never known the scarcity of the common man. This impulse to supplement the physical self extended down to the very mechanics of speech and expression. The history of false teeth offers a fascinating glimpse into the engineering of a lucky face. In centuries past, a set of ivory or gold teeth was more than a medical necessity. It was a trophy of survival and success. To possess a perfect, gleaming smile was to signal that one had the resources to repair what time and age had broken. It allowed a leader to project a sense of unwavering confidence, a winner's smile that could be manufactured even as the underlying structure of the jaw weakened. It was the ultimate prosthetic of authority, ensuring that the face remained a fortress of perceived strength. Furthermore, we see the strategic use of jewelry and heavy ornamentation as a form of facial fortification. By embedding pearls, gold, and precious stones into the very structure of the face and headpiece, historical figures created a visual barrier of engineered fortune. These artifacts served to dazzle the observer, distracting the eye from any perceived imperfections and replacing them with the shimmering evidence of accumulated wealth. It was a way to literally wear one's luck, making it an inseparable part of the physical form. Even the use of ceremonial masks in public appearances served this same psychological purpose. By donning a mask that embodied an ideal of symmetry, power, or divine favor, a figure could temporarily inhabit a lucky archetype. They were not hiding their identity so much as they were amplifying a specific version of their destiny. This is the core of engineered fortune. It is the belief that by physically altering the face to match a societal ideal, one can trick the universe and the public into granting the rewards of the lucky. It is a desperate, beautiful, and profound human endeavor to sculpt a face that the world will inevitably reward. But what if the very bones and muscles of our faces could be reshaped to force the hand of fate? While history gave us the paint and the prosthetic, the modern era has gifted us the scalpel and the syringe, ushering in a new epoch where the pursuit of fortune is no longer a matter of decoration, but of structural engineering. We have entered an age of anatomical revision, where the quest for a lucky face has moved from the surface of the skin into the very architecture of the skull. In the contemporary landscape, the goal is to surgically manufacture the lucky aesthetic, creating a face that satisfies our subconscious cravings for symmetry, health, and perceived status. At the heart of this movement is the rise of the Instagram face, a phenomenon where global beauty standards have become homogenized into a singular, recognizable template. It is a face defined by high cheekbones, a small, upturned nose, and full, pillowy lips. This is the face of the digital elite, a visual currency that signals success in an era where visibility is synonymous with power. By seeking these specific proportions, individuals are attempting to buy into a collective consensus of what a successful person looks like. They are not just seeking beauty, they are attempting to engineer a facial geometry that triggers the halo effect. hoping that by looking like the fortunate, they will eventually be treated as such. This quest is most visible in the widespread pursuit of facial symmetry. Through rhinoplasty and the strategic use of dermal fillers, people are systematically erasing the irregularities of their birth. There is a profound psychological desire here to fix what is perceived as bad luck. If a crooked nose or an asymmetrical jaw is seen as a flaw in the design of one's destiny, then surgery becomes a tool of cosmic correction. It is a physical manifestation of the belief that we can optimize our lives by optimizing our proportions. We are attempting to smooth out the jagged edges of our identity to create a face that the world will find easier to trust and more rewarding to favor. However, this engineering of luck has led to a strange and unsettling homogenization. As more people pursue the same idealized metrics of fortune, the lucky face begins to lose its unique character, becoming a mass-produced mask of success. We see the commercialization of fortune in every aesthetic clinic, where luck is packaged as a series of procedures. It is marketed as a way to unlock doors that were previously closed, turning the face into a piece of software that can be upgraded to improve one's social standing. We are trying to build a fortress of favorable perceptions. By sculpting the face into a masterpiece of symmetry, we are attempting to bypass the friction of human interaction, hoping to create a visage that commands immediate confidence and invites effortless opportunity. It is the ultimate modern ritual of fortune, where the scalpel serves as the architect of a new, engineered destiny. But even with the most precise surgical intervention, a haunting question remains and lingers in the quiet spaces of our reflection. What happens when the face changes, but the fortune doesn't? We have entered an era where we can physically manufacture the architecture of luck, yet we often find that the external shift fails to catalyze an internal transformation. This creates a profound psychological letdown, a dissonance between the mirror and the reality of one's life. When a person undergoes a radical structural change to their appearance, they are often seeking a shortcut to a different destiny. They hope that by adopting the geometry of the fortunate, the universe will instinctively rearrange itself to provide the rewards of success. However, when the surgery is complete and the new symmetry is perfect, but the opportunities remain stagnant and the inner turmoil persists, the result is a jarring emotional vacuum. This phenomenon touches upon the uncanny valley of modified faces. When a face is altered to meet a standardized ideal of luck, it can sometimes lose the subtle, unique microexpressions that convey genuine human character. There is a risk that the face becomes a polished mask, a masterpiece of engineering that lacks the spark of authentic vitality. In this state, the face may look lucky to a stranger, but it feels hollow to the person wearing it. They find themselves in a liminal space where they have successfully bought the appearance of success, but have yet to acquire the substance of it. We must distinguish between looking lucky and being lucky. The former is a matter of external perception, a byproduct of the halo effect, where our brains default to trusting and favoring symmetrical, healthy-looking features. The latter, however, is a complex weave of personality, resilience, and internal belief. Fortune is not merely a reflection of bone structure. It is often a manifestation of how an individual navigates their environment. A person can possess the most enviable facial proportions in the world, but if they lack the internal confidence or the character to seize opportunity, the face remains a decorative shell. This highlights the severe limits of external modification. While we can sculpt the cheekbones or refine the chin, we cannot surgically implant the temperament that sustains a fortunate life. Fortune is often maintained by the way we carry ourselves, the way we speak, and the way we react to adversity. These are internal qualities that no scalpel can reach. When the face is perfected but the fortune does not follow, it serves as a stark reminder that while the world may judge us by our covers, our true destiny is authored by the spirit behind the eyes. The face is the invitation, but the soul provides the substance. Without that internal alignment, the most perfect face in the world remains a beautiful, silent monument to an unfulfilled promise. And yet, if the physical architecture of the face can be sculpted by the surgeon, what happens when that same canvas is reimagined by the algorithm? We have moved beyond the era of the scalpel and into the realm of the pixel, where the pursuit of a lucky face has been democratized by the digital lens. In the palms of our hands, we hold tools that can instantly rewrite our facial geometry, offering a shortcut to the archetypes of fortune we have spent centuries trying to cultivate. But as these tools become universal, they do more than just enhance our appearance. They are fundamentally distorting the global standard of what it means to look fortunate. Social media filters have ushered in a period of digital democratization, where the aesthetics of the elite are available to everyone with a smartphone. However, this accessibility comes with a hidden cost: the erosion of natural facial variety. When we use a filter to slim the jaw, enlarge the eyes, or smooth the skin, we are not merely correcting a perceived flaw. We are participating in a collective movement toward an algorithmic perfection. These filters are not neutral tools. They are programmed by engineers and guided by data to favor specific proportions that our brains are evolutionarily primed to associate with health, vitality, and success. As these filters become more sophisticated, they create a feedback loop of visual uniformity. We are witnessing the birth of a global beauty standard that acts as a form of digital currency. To possess the filtered look is to signal that one belongs to the modern elite, a visual shorthand for a life that is curated, optimized, and successful. It is a standardized, lucky face, one that transcends borders and cultures, replacing local nuances of beauty with a singular, homogenized template of fortune. This creates a profound psychological weight for the observer. When we constantly scroll through a feed of filtered faces, our brains begin to treat these digital distortions as the baseline for reality. We start to view our own unedited features as unlucky or incomplete, creating a state of perpetual inadequacy. We are no longer comparing ourselves to the people in our neighborhoods. We are comparing ourselves to a mathematically perfected archetype that does not actually exist in physical space. This is the creation of a digital luck archetype, a ghost in the machine that we all strive to inhabit. By constantly viewing these faces, we train our subconscious to believe that luck is something that can be toggled on with a swipe of a finger. We begin to mistake the filter for the fortune, forgetting that the most profound expressions of human character are often found in the very irregularities the algorithm seeks to erase. In our quest to match the digital ideal, we risk losing the unique, authentic features that give a face its true story, trading the richness of human diversity for a polished, pixelated mask of perceived destiny. But what if the very essence of fortune is not a physical trait to be inherited, but a performance to be mastered? If we accept that the world reacts to the geometry of our faces, then it follows that the most astute among us will seek to choreograph that reaction. This is the transition from having luck to performing it. It is the move from the passive acceptance of one's biological lottery to the active construction of a fortunate persona. To perform luck is to understand that the face is not a static sculpture, but a dynamic medium of communication. It is about the deliberate cultivation of an aura that signals to the subconscious of the observer that you are a person for whom the universe provides. This begins with the mastery of body language and the subtle mechanics of facial perception. A lucky face is often perceived as one that is at ease, a visage that does not betray anxiety or hesitation. By consciously relaxing the muscles around the eyes and softening the jaw, an individual can project a sense of effortless competence. It is the art of projecting a baseline of success. When you move with a certain grace, your facial features are perceived as more harmonious, more symmetrical, and ultimately more fortunate. You are training the observer's brain to see a person who is already winning, thereby inviting the opportunities that such a person would naturally attract. Deep within this performance lies the sophisticated use of microexpressions. These are the involuntary flickers of emotion that occur in a fraction of a second. A person who can consciously regulate these fleeting movements can project an unshakable sense of inner calm. By suppressing the tiny twitches of uncertainty and replacing them with a steady, winner's gaze, a person can manufacture a persona of high-status reliability. It is a form of psychological branding, where the self is marketed as a high-value asset. You are not just showing your face, you are broadcasting a signal of stability and prosperity. This branding extends into the deliberate curation of style and grooming as an extension of the face. Every choice, from the sharp line of a haircut to the specific way a brow is shaped, serves to reinforce the narrative of fortune. These are the supporting pillars of the persona, ensuring that the lucky message is consistent across every visual touchpoint. When your grooming aligns with the archetypes of success, it reinforces the subconscious bias that you are destined for prominence. Ultimately, this shift from having to performing luck creates a profound psychological transformation. When you adopt the persona of the fortunate, your own internal narrative begins to shift. By mimicking the outward signs of success, you begin to internalize the confidence of the winner. The mask eventually begins to merge with the wearer, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where the performance of luck becomes the very engine that generates it. You are no longer waiting for the universe to grant you a lucky face. You are inhabiting a persona so convincing that the world has no choice but to treat you as if you were born with it. Have you ever wondered if the universe is truly handing out favors, or if you are simply designing the lens through which you view the world? To understand the mystery of the lucky face, we must first deconstruct the very concept of luck itself. Is it a cosmic currency distributed by the stars, or is it a psychological architecture built within the human mind? This question brings us to the profound distinction between being perceived as lucky and the internal sensation of feeling lucky. From the outside, an observer might see a person whose life seems to unfold with effortless grace. They see the right opportunities appearing at the perfect moment and the smooth navigation of obstacles. To the observer, this person possesses a lucky face, a visage that seems to radiate an aura of favor. However, this is an external perception, a narrative constructed by the witness. It is a projection of the observer's biases and their inability to see the invisible gears of preparation and timing. But inside the mind of the individual, the experience is vastly different. Feeling lucky is an internal state deeply tied to the concept of self-efficacy. This is the belief in one's own ability to execute tasks and achieve goals. When a person possesses high self-efficacy, they do not view a successful outcome as a random stroke of fate. Instead, they see it as a result of their own agency. Conversely, someone with a low sense of self-efficacy might experience the same success but attribute it entirely to luck, creating a sense of passivity. They become a passenger in their own life, waiting for the wind to change, rather than the captain steering the ship. This leads us to the psychological lucky mindset. Research suggests that individuals who identify as lucky tend to be more observant of opportunities. They are primed to notice the open doors that others might walk right past. Because they believe they are lucky, they remain alert, which in turn increases the frequency of successful outcomes. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. This creates a powerful feedback loop between belief and reality. When you believe you are a person of fortune, your internal narrative shifts. You begin to interpret neutral events as positive signs. You become more resilient in the face of failure because you believe your turn is coming. This internal confidence changes your body language, your microexpressions, and your willingness to take risks. When you take more risks, you encounter more opportunities. When those opportunities result in success, they reinforce your internal belief that you are lucky. Over time, this cycle hardens into a personality. The lucky face, we see in others may simply be the external mask of a person who has mastered the internal art of expectation. They aren't being chosen by the universe. They are choosing to see the universe in a way that favors their success. Luck, perhaps, is not something that happens to us, but a frequency we learn to tune into. And yet, we must ask ourselves, what if the mirror is not merely a reflection of who we are, but the primary architect of what we are allowed to become? While we have explored the internal mindset of luck, we must now turn our attention to the physical bridge between the soul and the world. The face is the primary interface through which we negotiate our existence with reality. It is the first thing a stranger sees, and perhaps more importantly, it is the first thing we see when we wake. This constant, silent dialogue with our own reflection creates a profound psychological feedback loop that dictates the very scope of our external opportunities. Consider the mechanics of the mirror. Every time you look at yourself, you are reinforcing a set of internal scripts. When you perceive your own face as one of capability and warmth, you cultivate a sense of facial vitality. This is not merely a matter of vanity, but of physiological projection. Self-esteem acts as a biological dimmer switch. When self-esteem is low, the face often defaults to a defensive posture. The muscles around the eyes may tighten, the jaw may set in a subconscious clench, and the brow may furrow. These are the micro-expressions of a mind that feels besieged by the world. When these expressions become habitual, they project an aura of unavailability or apprehension, which in turn causes the external world to react with caution. In social dynamics, this creates a silent gatekeeping mechanism. The human brain is wired to scan for safety and competence. If your internal self-image is clouded by imposter syndrome, your face may betray you by projecting a lack of belonging. You might walk into a room feeling like an intruder, and your facial muscles will subtly mirror that hesitation. Conversely, those who inhabit the winner's stance carry a different facial architecture. They move with a relaxed openness, a sense of ease that signals to others that they are entitled to the space they occupy. This isn't just about a smile. It is about the lack of tension in the features, a sign of a person who believes they are worthy of the opportunities they seek. The world responds to these cues with startling speed. When you project a face of confidence, people are more likely to offer you a seat at the table, a share of the profit, or a chance to lead. They are responding to the vitality you project from within. If your internal state is one of self-doubt, your face may project a closed door, causing others to subconsciously withhold their own favors. In this sense, the face becomes a physical manifestation of your internal permission. By refining your self-image, you are essentially sculpting the mask that the world uses to judge your potential. You are not changing your features, but rather the energy they radiate. When you align your internal belief with your external expression, the face becomes a conduit for fortune, turning your inner conviction into an invitation for the world to provide for you. But what if the very structure of your features is not a biological accident, but a sacred map of the spirit? Beyond the psychological feedback loops of self-esteem and the physical mechanics of muscle tension lies a deeper, more ancient mystery. In many metaphysical traditions, the face is viewed as the primary vessel of the human soul, a divine reflection of our interior destiny. It is here, in the arrangement of bone and the depth of the gaze, that the spiritual landscape of an individual is said to be written. To the mystic, the face is not a mask that we wear, but a map of the spirit. Just as a navigator uses a chart to understand the terrain of the land, the seeker of spiritual truth views the facial features as a topographical layout of a person's inner journey. Every line, every curve, and every proportion is believed to correspond to a spiritual coordinate. When we speak of a lucky face in this context, we are discussing a visage that appears in harmony with the cosmic order. It is a face that suggests the soul is in alignment with its purpose, creating a resonance that others can feel even before a word is spoken. At the heart of this spiritual connection lies the concept of the divine reflection. This philosophy suggests that the physical body is a mirror of the metaphysical state. A soul that is at peace, filled with clarity and purpose, is believed to radiate a specific aesthetic frequency. This is why certain faces seem to hold a magnetic pull. They do not just look fortunate, they look right. This is the face of a soul that has found its center, reflecting an internal state of grace into the external world. Fortune, in this light, is not a random event. It is a visible manifestation of an internal spiritual frequency. Perhaps the most profound element of this spiritual map is the eyes. Throughout history, the eyes have been hailed as the windows of the soul, the only part of the face that remains truly unmasked. They are the bridge between the internal sanctuary and the external reality. A lucky gaze is often described as one that possesses a certain luminosity or depth, a sign of a spirit that sees clearly. When the eyes are clear, the soul is considered awake. This clarity allows the individual to perceive the hidden paths of opportunity, making it appear as though the universe is providing for them, when in fact, their soul is simply seeing what is already there. Even the proportions of the face hold spiritual weight. In the study of sacred geometry, symmetry and balance are seen as markers of the divine. A face that adheres to certain proportions is thought to be more in tune with the universal blueprint. These proportions are not merely about beauty, they are about the harmony of the self. When the features are balanced, it signifies a soul that is integrated, where the different facets of the human experience, emotion, intellect, and spirit are working in concert. This harmony creates a spiritual buoyancy, a sense of lightness that others perceive as luck. It is the ultimate truth of the face of fortune. It is the soul's inner light, finally finding a way to shine through the skin. And yet, we must confront a haunting paradox that challenges our understanding of destiny. What happens when the divine map of the face remains perfectly balanced, yet the life it leads remains defined by shadow? Why do some individuals possess every hallmark of a fortunate visage, only to find themselves trapped in a cycle of misfortune? This is the tragedy of the unlucky archetype, where the physical blueprint of success fails to manifest as lived reality. To understand this, we must first distinguish between aesthetic luck and situational luck. A person may possess the facial proportions that humans have historically associated with leadership, grace, and vitality. They carry the pretty privilege that opens doors and invites warmth from strangers. However, these features are merely the invitation, they are not the guarantee. A beautiful face can provide the initial spark of opportunity, but it cannot sustain the flame if the surrounding environment is structurally designed to extinguish it. We must look toward the cold reality of systemic barriers. A face may radiate the aura of a winner, but that visage cannot bypass the invisible walls of socioeconomic disparity or institutional gatekeeping. When a person with a lucky face lacks the resources, connections, or foundational safety nets afforded to others, their appearance becomes a cruel irony. They are granted the look of success without the tools of success. In these instances, the face becomes a mask of potential that the world refuses to unlock, creating a profound psychological dissonance. The individual is forced to navigate a world that expects them to excel based on their appearance, while simultaneously denying them the practical means to do so. This failure of pretty privilege carries a heavy psychological toll. For the individual who possesses a fortunate face but lacks the fortune to match, the internal narrative can become one of profound alienation. They may begin to feel like a fraud, a ghost inhabiting a vessel of success that they cannot inhabit themselves. It creates a unique form of existential exhaustion, where the discrepancy between their external projection and their internal experience breeds a sense of invisibility. They are seen, but they are not heard. They are recognized, but they are not reached. Ultimately, this mystery teaches us that while the face is a powerful conduit of perception, it is not the sole architect of destiny. The most profound truth lies in the power of character over features. A lucky face can provide a head start, but it cannot replace the substance of the spirit. The tragedy of the unlucky archetype reminds us that fortune is a complex tapestry woven from the threads of internal agency, external circumstances, and the raw movement of probability. A face may be the map, but it is the will of the traveler that determines the destination. When the face remains unlucky, despite every aesthetic advantage, it serves as a somber reminder that the universe does not judge us by the reflection in the mirror, but by the depth of the journey we choose to walk. But if the face is not the sole architect of destiny, what is the ultimate truth behind the face of fortune? We have traveled through the corridors of biology, the echoes of ancient mysticism, and the complex wiring of the human psyche to reach this final summit. The truth is not found in a single bone structure or a specific curve of the lip, but in the profound synthesis of all these forces. The face of fortune is a living tapestry where biology, culture, and psychology collide to create a shared hallucination of fate. We must realize that luck, in its purest form, is a human construct. It is a story we tell ourselves to make sense of the chaotic dance of probability. When we see a lucky face, we are actually witnessing a convergence of favorable traits that the human brain is evolutionarily primed to reward. We are seeing a biological shortcut to trust, a cultural script of success, and a psychological projection of our own desires. The face does not generate luck. It serves as a lightning rod for the opportunities that the world is already prepared to give. This brings us to the vital realization of agency over appearance. While the world may grant a head start to the fortunate visage, the face itself is merely a canvas, never a script. A face can open a door, but it cannot walk through it for you. It can invite a stranger's smile, but it cannot forge a lasting legacy. The ultimate truth is that destiny is fluid. It is not a pre-written line in a book, but a path carved by the interaction between our internal will and the external world. When we rely solely on the face, we become passive observers of our own lives. When we recognize the face as a tool, we reclaim our power. We must move beyond the fascination with the mirror and toward the mastery of the self. The face is a reflection of our internal state, but it is also a bridge to our external reality. It is the medium through which we communicate our readiness to the universe. To possess a lucky face is to be in harmony with the perception of others, but to possess a lucky life is to be in harmony with one's own purpose. Ultimately, the mystery of the face of fortune dissolves into a singular, grounding truth. We are not the faces we wear. We are the consciousness that inhabits them. The face is a map, yes, but the map is not the territory. Fortune is found in the courage to act, the resilience to endure, and the clarity to see opportunity where others see only shadows. The face of fortune is not a gift bestowed by the stars, but a harmony achieved between the soul's inner light and the world's outward gaze. It is the moment when the person you are becomes the person the world sees, and in that alignment, the mystery of luck finally finds its home. And yet, we must confront the ultimate paradox. Can we ever truly separate the face from the destiny? We have spent this journey dissecting the mechanics of the mirror, exploring how bone structure invites favor, how microexpressions signal competence, and how the ancient mystics mapped the soul onto the skin. But as we stand at the summit of this inquiry, we find ourselves facing a haunting truth. The face and the life it leads are not two separate entities, but a single, symbiotic organism. They are the same story told in two different languages. The face is the externalization of an internal history. Every line of experience, every shadow of habit, and every spark of vitality is a physical manifestation of a life lived. You cannot truly isolate the appearance from the experience because the experience is what carves the appearance. A face that projects luck often does so because it is a vessel for a spirit that has learned to navigate the world with grace. It is the visible result of 1,000 internal victories and defeats. When we see a lucky face, We are seeing the physical residue of a soul that has found its own rhythm in the chaos of existence. In this sense, the face is not the architect of the house, but the very stones from which it is built. They are inextricably linked in a feedback loop where the internal self-image shapes the external expression, and the external expression, in turn, shapes the opportunities the world provides. To believe one can have a lucky face without a lucky internal orientation is to believe a ship can sail without a hull. They are one and the same. This brings us to the final mystery of human perception. We are hardwired to seek patterns, to find meaning in the symmetry of a cheekbone or the light in an eye. We project destiny onto these features because we are searching for a way to make the universe feel less random. We want to believe that if we can see the luck, we can understand it. But the true mystery lies in the fact that the face is a bridge, not a destination. It is the point of contact where the individual meets the infinite. As we reach the conclusion of our journey into the mystery for sleep, we must recognize that luck is ultimately a harmony. It is the resonance that occurs when the person you are becomes the person the world sees. When your internal purpose aligns with your external presence, the friction of life softens. The lucky face is merely the moment when the inner light finally finds a way to shine through the skin. So, what does it mean to be fortunate? To be fortunate is not to be handed a winning card by the stars. It is the ability to cultivate an internal landscape so vibrant and clear that it radiates outward, coloring the very way the world perceives you. It is the courage to inhabit your own skin with such conviction that the world has no choice but to respond in kind. The face may be the map, but the destiny is the journey you choose to walk upon it. In the end, the mystery of luck is solved not by looking into the mirror, but by looking through it.